But this trust is not in the numbers. It is in a promise. A promise that the energy you traded for that money, your time, your skill, your labor, can be reclaimed tomorrow at a similar value. History shows this is the most consistently broken promise in finance. People wake up to find their savings gone, not stolen by a thief in the night, but evaporated in broad daylight by their own government. This is not an accident. It is not a policy failure. It is a feature. It is the end game of a system that has run out of time. Every empire in history eventually faces a choice: default on its debts and admit failure, or erase those debts by destroying the currency. It always chooses the currency. Inflation is not a complex economic theory. It is slow theft. It is the final, desperate act of a state that has prioritized promises over production. It is the transfer of wealth from the savers to the debtors. The pattern is predictable. It is a law of collapse, as certain as gravity. First, trust is built. Then, trust is leveraged. Finally, trust is betrayed. To see our present, we must look to the past. Consider the Roman denarius. For centuries, it was the world's reserve currency. A silver coin trusted from the walls of Britain to the markets of Persia. Its power was not in a promise. Its power was in its content, nearly pure silver. Rome built its empire on this trust, but the empire grew too large. The state's expenses for wars, for welfare, for bread and circuses outgrew its income. The emperors needed more coins, but they had no more silver. So they began to cheat. Under Nero, the purity of the denarius dropped to 90%. By 200 AD, it was 40%. By 270 AD, the silver coin was just a bronze core with a thin chemical wash. The market panicked, trust cracked, prices for wheat and oil exploded. Soldiers, paid in worthless coins, revolted. The economy seized. The lesson is absolute. When a state can no longer produce its way to wealth, it will pretend its way to wealth by debasing the money. You have seen this before. It is the silent, invisible reduction of your purchasing power. It is the inflation that eats your savings, even as the numbers in your account stay the same. The technology of betrayal simply evolves. In the 11th century, China's Song dynasty invented the world's first paper money, the jiaozi. It was a brilliant innovation, a government-backed certificate, a promise redeemable for heavy coins. It was convenient, efficient, and fueled a massive economic boom. But the promise was too tempting to keep. Facing external threats and massive internal deficits, the government stopped issuing notes against its assets and started printing them to pay its bills. They printed to pay soldiers. They printed to fund projects. They printed because they could. Within a single generation, the jiaozi was worthless. The public refused it. Barter returned. The great financial innovation became a symbol of betrayal. The pattern proves the switch from sound money, a real asset, to fiat money, a government promise, is the single most dangerous moment for an economy. Today, we don't even have paper. We have digital ledgers, trust in a database. The speed of betrayal is now instant. This brings us to the terminal phase, the moment when slow theft becomes violent robbery, hyperinflation. We all know the images from 1920s Germany, wheelbarrows of cash to buy a single loaf of bread. After World War I, Germany was burdened with impossible reparations debts payable in gold or foreign currency. The Weimar government faced a political choice: mass default, national bankruptcy and political collapse, or print. They chose to print. They printed marks to pay striking workers. They printed to buy foreign currency. They printed to keep the illusion of a functioning state alive. In 1921, $1 was 75 marks. By November 1923, $1 was 4.2 trillion marks. The currency was not just devalued, it was annihilated. It wiped out the entire middle class. It erased all savings, all pensions, and all bonds. This is the critical insight. Hyperinflation is not an economic event, it is a political one. It is a deliberate policy choice masked as an emergency. It is the government sacrificing its citizens' futures to protect its own present. It is the destruction of the past. It is the theft of the future. It is the final act of financial war against a population. And if you think this is ancient history, look at Zimbabwe. In the 2000s, after controversial land reforms, the nation's agricultural production, its economic engine, collapsed. Tax revenues vanished. To pay its armies, its police, and its political allies, the government turned on the printing presses. The result was the second worst hyperinflation in recorded history. Prices doubled every 24 hours. The state issued a $100 trillion bill, a piece of paper that could not buy a bus ticket. The economy simply stopped. The lesson from Harari is the same as the lesson from Rome. Production is the only source of wealth. When production dies, printing is just a death rattle. You see this pattern today, not in trillions, but in percentages. Quantitative easing, stimulus packages, asset purchase programs. The language is different, the math is identical. From the silver denarius to the German mark, from the Chinese zhaozi to the modern dollar, the story is one. The technology of money changes, but the human temptation to solve debt with printing does not. The currencies are different, the outcome is the same. Now, you will hear the objection. This is true, but every system shares the same weakness, leverage and denial. Collapse isn't random, it's the math catching up. It is the inevitable result of promises that cannot be kept. The US dollar is not special. It is not immune to this math. It is simply at a different stage of the same predictable cycle. Its status as the world's reserve currency has only allowed it to export its inflation and delay its consequences, but the math always catches up. So, how did those who saw it early survive? In Rome, in China, in Weimar. They did not trust the promises, they trusted the patterns. When the currency failed, they did not hold paper, they held value. This is the dual payoff, the survival formula that repeats through every collapse. First, hard assets. Real value hides in what can't be printed. Gold and silver, the monetary constants for 5,000 years. Productive land that creates food. Businesses that create real-world value and generate real income. These are not investments, they are insurance against the promise breakers. Second, hard skills. When the German mark collapsed, the ones who rose were not the bankers holding bonds. The ones who could feed, fix, or trade, they rose. Your ability to create tangible value for other humans is the ultimate currency. A skill cannot be inflated. It cannot be confiscated by a central bank. It is wealth you truly own. Gold, land, and skill, the only insurance. History shows that trust is the most valuable currency and the most perishable. Empires do not die by invasion, they die by suicide. They print their own ruin. The only question is whether you can recognize the pattern before it completes. If you want to see the next financial pattern before it repeats, subscribe. Next episode, we analyze the kingdoms that borrowed their collapse and how modern sovereign debt is the largest, most fragile bubble in human history.